In this tutorial, we'll see how to find outliers in the data using Excel. An outlier is nothing but a data point that differs significantly from other observations. The outlier could be either due to a variability in the measurement, or it may indicate an experimental error. If it is an experimental error, you would actually want to exclude such data points from the data set, because an outlier can cause serious problems in statistical analysis. But at the same time, an outlier can also give you some keen insights on the data. So it is not always that you would want to exclude the outliers. To find the outliers in Excel, first we need to calculate quartiles. Let's see how it's done. Let's use the COVID-19 data set, and let's use only the new cases column. This gives you the new cases that we get on a daily basis. Let's see if there are any outliers in this column. So to find outliers, you'll have to find quartiles. You need first quartile Q1, third quartile Q3, interquartile range, which is the difference between quartile 3 and quartile 1, then the lower bound and the upper bound. So any value that falls below the lower bound or any value that falls above the upper bound will be considered as an outlier. Let's see how to find these quartiles. To find Q1, let's use the Excel formula quartile.exe. Let's give the array as input, and we need the first quartile, so let's give the number 1. This gives you the first quartile. In a similar way, the third quartile can be obtained using the Excel formula quartile.exe, same formula. The values from the first to last would be the array, and after comma you need the third quartile, which is the 75th percentile, so give the number 3, then enter. And the interquartile range is the difference between quartile 3 and quartile 1. To find the lower bound, you need to subtract 1.5 times the interquartile range from the quartile 1. So by subtracting 1.5 times the interquartile range from quartile 1, you get the lower bound, and by adding 1.5 times the interquartile range to third quartile, you get the upper bound. We have the upper bound and the lower bound. So let's see that the lower bound has a negative value, and in our case the new cases are the number of new COVID cases that you get on a daily basis. That cannot be a negative value. Therefore, let's have our lower bound as 0. So now to see which of these points are the outliers, all we need to do is, as I mentioned earlier, for a data point to be an outlier, it either has to fall below the lower bound or fall above the upper bound. So we can use a simple OR Excel function. The first would be to check if this value is greater than the upper bound. Let's use function F4 to make it an absolute reference, or if this value is lesser than the lower bound. Let's make this an absolute value and enter. So this gives you false, therefore this is not an outlier. Let's double click, and if you filter, add a filter, so all those values that are true, if you filter the true values, all these values are above the upper bound, and you can find one below 0, minus 53. So this is also not the right data. Now if you might want to plot these points and see how many outliers are there, you could do that using box plots. To create a box plot, let's select the data, let's select this column, go to insert, recommended charts, let's go to all charts, and if you come below, you have box and whisker, click OK. So this gives you a fair idea of how many outliers it has. So as you see, the box plot gives you the lower bound at the first quartile, which is 3, 4, 5, 3. This is the first quartile. You see 3, 4, 5, 3. This is the median value. And then you have the third quartile. It is 100,158. This is your third quartile. And this is the upper bound, and then all the other values that are above the upper bound are the outliers. This is just a good visualization of how your data falls into this box plot. So once you know which are the outliers, you could then decide to either delete the outliers or leave it as it is. So you could filter the outliers, select true, these are all the outliers. If you think these outliers are useful for the analysis, you don't have to remove it, but if you think these might skew the results or might affect your results, you can delete all these values from your data set.